So this video is on parallelism. In this particular section, I want to talk about parallel query slaves. In the OCM exam, parallel query slaves are referenced, or they talk about parallel query slaves, and I just want to talk about some init.org parameters that help manage parallel query slaves. So without further ado, let's look at that. There are four parameters that you should be aware of that help manage the number of parallel query slaves. The first two that are important are the min servers and the max servers. The max servers is a derived parameter. It comes up with a certain number based on the CPU and the particular hardware and what have you. However, you can lower it. The min servers by default is set to 0, but you can raise it, which we'll do in a minute. And then there's two other parameters that are sort of related. One is the parallel min percent. This is the minimum number of, by percentage, the minimum number of parallel query slaves that have to be present before parallelism actually takes place. So if there's not a minimum number of parallel query slaves available for a particular query, parallelism actually won't take place. And finally, there is another parameter called parallel degree limit. This is set to CPU at the system level, but this is probably a parameter that we would probably want to use at the session level. So we limit the number of parallel queries slaves that can be used for a particular query or set of queries for a session. So without further ado, let's just take a look at the number of parallel query slaves that are running right now. Our database is called OCM. So notice we have no processes now that are these parallel query slaves running at the moment because our parallel min servers are set to 0, but we're going to change that. Now let's run this particular command. So to summarize, we can set the min servers, the max servers, the degree limit, and this is probably most applicable for the at the session level, and also the where is it? The min percent. Yeah, here it is, min percent. So the minimum number of parallel query slaves that have to be available for parallelism to take place. In this section, I want to talk about AutoDOP, about how you enable AutoDOP. Actually, not how you enable it, but the prerequisites for AutoDOP. And the big prerequisite for AutoDOP is that the I/O has to be calibrated. And I'm not going to do that here, but I just want to mention what that procedure is that you have to use. It said specifically on the OCM exam that you did not have to do calibration, so I want to make sure if they want us to test for AutoDOP or use AutoDOP that I want to see if the calibration has actually been enabled or been done. So the parameter or the procedure actually to use to calibrate the I/O is DBMS Resource Manager. It's DBMS Resource Manager calibrate underscore IO, and I'm actually not going to run it here. Underscore IO, but we're not actually going to run it here. But it specifically said during the OCM exam that you did not have to run calibrate, or didn't want you to. But I wanted to be able to check to see if the calibration is actually done. So we're actually going to do that right now. And to do that, there's a $V parameter, or $V view to look at. Select star. $V So this is the $V view that we will look at. In my particular case, the calibration is not done, so even if I try to do auto DOP, I'm going to get messages that auto DOP has been turned or not enabled because IO status hasn't been turned on. So this is what we want to check for during the OCM exam. In this section, I want to talk about the options with the init.or parameter parallel degree policy. Parallel degree policy can have three values: manual, limited, and auto. And really, in this particular section, I want to differentiate between between auto and limited. And really, the difference is this: auto will always try to do will try to figure out the level of parallelism that makes sense, and it will do it automatically. Limited will only do this in the case where the object is given a degree of parallelism of parallel, or the default degree of parallelism. If it's given an explicit degree of parallelism, it will revert to the manual type of parallelism, and I'm going to give you an example of this in just a second. So let's go ahead and log in. Let's just log in as SH. Okay, so let's do show parameter parallel. Let's put degree. And in this case, we can see that right now the parallel degree policy is manual, but I'm going to alter the session. So let's do alter session set is equal to auto. Set to auto. So let's do explain plan for select star from sales. Oh, first of all, let's see what the degree of parallelism is for sales. So select degree from user tables, where table name is equal to sales. So right now it's set to degree of 1, so let's just see what happens when we have auto DOP turned on and with a degree of 1. So let's do explain plan for select star from sales, select star from table, dbms xplan.display. And although I don't have my IO calibration turned on, it tried to do auto DOP at this point, but it skipped it, but it tried to do auto DOP. Now let's go ahead and do alter table sales parallel. This gives it a default degree of parallelism, and I can prove that. Select degree from user tables where table name is equal to sales. Now that it's set to default, let's try it again. Explain plan for select star from sales, select star from table, dbmsxplan display. And again, it tried to do the auto DOP, and it failed in this case because I don't have the IO calibration set. So in this particular case, when I have the parallel degree policy set to auto, it always tries to do some sort of level of automatic degree of parallelism, despite what is set at the object level. So let's go ahead and set the object level back to 1. Alter table sales parallel 1. Select degree from user tables where table name is equal to sales. That's back to 1. Let's do alter session set parallel So now it's set to limited and degree of 1. If we do explain plans now, explain plan for select star from sales. If we do it now, no auto DOP will be attempted. So, and we can prove that by doing select star from table dbms xplan display. And as you can see, there's no note down here that says auto DOP is attempted. But let's go ahead and do this. Alter table sales parallel, just parallel, and then we do again select degree from user tables where table name is equal to sales. Now it's default, so now we have to default with limited parallel degree policy. Now let's do explain plan. Explain plan for select star from sales. And let's do select star from table dbms xplan.display. And you can see auto DOP was attempted. So when it's set to limited, when the the parallel degree policy is set to limited, it will perform auto DOP when the underlying object has a default level of parallelism, and that's really the only case. And that's the end of this section. So in this section, what I want to do is show how we calculate the query degree of parallelism and the number of parallel query sets. So I have an example. So let's take a look at that example. Okay, and let's look at it. Let's look at my example. So I'm going to run this particular query. Notice that I am using a session level hint as opposed to an object level hint. This is a newer evolution of the hints. Rather than having to specify the particular table or underlying tables, we just say use a parallelism of 8. So let's go ahead and run it. And let's look at the following $V table. Select star from $PQ stat. Okay, so the two important rows here to look at is allocation height. In this case, it's 8. That's our degree of parallelism. Allocation height is our degree of parallelism, but the number of server threads is 16. And actually, we divide this number by this, and we get the number of parallel query sets. So there were parallelism of 8, but there were 2 query sets that were run. We can look at that. Let's run this query again. Okay, and we can see here in this particular the explain plan, we can see that there are 2 query sets. And that's all there is for this particular section. So in this section, what I want to talk about is how to enable or disable session parallelism. The first thing, we need to identify what is enabled and what is disabled. Session parallelism is not an init.aura parameter, it's sort of a session parameter, and you can see it, what is enabled for you by looking at $session. I'm going to give you an example, so let's go ahead and do that. First of all, let's log in as a non-sys user because it's different for non-sys users. Alright, so let's just say username, PQ, status, PDML, status, and PDDL, status from $session, where sys or sid is equal to sys_context of user env so by default, the parallel query is enabled and parallel DDL is enabled. But by default, for non-sys users, parallel DML is disabled, so you would have to enable it. So let's go ahead and let's say enable it. Alter session enable parallel DML. Now let's run the same query. See, now we can see it's enabled. So we can also say alter session disable parallel DML, and also alter session disable parallel DML, and also we can force it. So let's just say here's the syntax to force. So we say alter session force parallel query parallel 8. This will force the parallel query, and it will force it to be parallel 8. So what's the difference between enabling and forcing? The difference is when you enable it, that means that any query that has that uses objects that have a DOP, degree of parallelism, or you use some hints, will be used. The force will be the degree of parallelism here that I specified will be used irrespective of what's in the query, if there's anything at all. So and that's it for this particular section. So in this section, all I want to do is differentiate between the two different types of hints. There's an older type of hint which we refer to as the object level hint, and a newer type of hint which we call the session level hint. And I just want to give you two examples. So let's go ahead and log in as OE. Let's do cat. Let's look. Start with this one. And this is an object level hint. In this particular case, the parallelism actually refers to the object, in this case order items. So, and we run it. Let's go ahead and run it. And let's look at and we can see that the degree of parallelism is 8, and there are two parallel query sets. Let's run it one more time, and let's say select star from table dbms xplan.display cursor, and we can see the two parallel query sets referenced here. Now let's look at the other type of parallel query hint, and that is a session level hint. Let's look at that first. In this case, we don't reference the objects at all. We just say, at the very beginning, we just say parallel 8. So we're giving it a degree of parallelism right away. So let's go ahead and run that. And have we logged out yet? I don't know. Let's log out. Let's back in. Select star from $PQ sesstat. Again, degree of parallelism is 8. And the number of parallel query sets is is 2. Let's run it one more time and select star from table dbms xplan display cursor, and it tells us that the degree of parallelism is 8, and we actually have two parallel query sets. And that's it for this section.